Welcome to the Belfast Book Club, and an effort, as we're doing more book studies for Daniel and I, to do some book reviews. I'm going to try and put more of these on the channel from each of us. And so this will be fun. Today, as I have started going through the books for my C.S. Lewis trip, the first one I read that's on our list is The Narnia Code by Michael Ward. Michael Ward, who is probably the greatest living theologian and scholar of C.S. Lewis, has written this book, and this is a very, very interesting book. He has a second version of this book, or I should say, this is the second version, actually. The first version is called Planet Narnia. It's a more scholarly version. This is the more popular, sort of bare bones essentialist version of the book. And so with that introduction, let's talk a little bit about the synopsis of the book. What is the book about? What is his thesis? And then I'll tell you what I think about his ability to defend these ideas. So the Code of Narnia that Ward is trying to figure out here is a question that plagues a lot of people who read the books, and especially in comparison to something like The Lord of the Rings. Even Tolkien himself was a big critic of Narnia in the sense that he felt like Lewis just threw in a bunch of things that were tropes or were well-worn territory in the fantasy genre, and he didn't reimagine them in his own world, or he didn't make them into something that really fit. They're just in the fantasy genre, so he figured, let me just throw them in here. And another one of the big things that people gripe about is the inclusion of Father Christmas, of Santa Claus, in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which we will get to here in a minute. It's one of the things that Ward begins teasing at the beginning of the book. And so Ward's argument here is that this is not actually at all what Lewis was doing. Yes, he's using fantasy tropes and things common in the genre, but placements and themes and undercurrents of each book have a specific purpose, even Father Christmas. And what this is about Copernicus, or before Copernicus. Before Copernicus came along in the medieval worldview, there was a certain view of the planets. There was a certain view of the way that the outer space was, and there was thought to be 7 planets. Here they are: the Moon, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Now, Lewis was a medievalist by day. As an academic, this is the world that he was heavily involved in. Maybe his greatest academic work was on literature of this time. And so there's no wonder that this would be in his head as he wrote other things. And Lewis was always curious about this. He even wrote a poem called The Planets. And so Ward, as he's reading Lewis's poetry, as he's thinking about his poetry, as he reflects on the Chronicles of Narnia, he comes to think, well, maybe there's a reason that there are 7 books. Maybe there's a reason that there were 7 planets. And this is his thesis, is that Lewis uses this pre-Corporian view of the 7 planets in the sky and their corresponding gods or goddesses and the corresponding mythologies and themes and virtues or vices that surround these stories in each planet, and puts them in each book of the Narnia series. So, here is his proposed list of the correspondence that we have We have the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which corresponds to Jupiter. We have Prince Caspian, which corresponds to Mars. We have the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, which corresponds to the Sun. That one's so fun because there's a bunch of golden imagery in that book. There's a bunch of alchemy imagery in the book. There's the pool that turns everything that goes into it as gold. It's a little on the nose, actually. You have the silver chair, which is corresponding to the moon. You have the horse and his boy, which corresponds to Mercury, the magician's nephew, which corresponds to Venus, which now makes sense of why you might think that Lewis messed up his Genesis story. It's because, although yes, he is playing with ideas from Genesis, from the Garden of Eden, he is also playing with ideas of Venus and apples and love and sacrifice, and specifically fruit that is born out of love that brings healing. That's why Diggory wants to take an apple back to his mother. And the last battle has to do with Saturn, Father Time, and the images around Father Time, the sickle and the hourglass, were images of Saturn. And the last battle, the end of time, the end of days, the end of Narnia, is what the last battle is all about. So this is his thesis. Michael Ward says, well, it's actually not that Lewis just threw fantasy tropes to the wall and saw what stuck and placed them in his books. It's that there was this view of the planets, and that every book has a corresponding planet. And he uses a lot of the themes of the book, right? I already mentioned this, but it's in the title, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, the one who is on the water as the sun rises. And so you have golden imagery, sun imagery that permeates that book. You have Jupiter, which Jupiter is a really interesting one as far as the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. One of the big things, the big themes in Jupiter and his story is about thrones, kingship, bringing proper order, and the hunting of stags, which are all major themes in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The bringing of proper order to Narnia after the White Witch is taken over. And this is associated with being jovial by Jove, by Jupiter. We mean by God, right? This is a Shakespearean term. And so Aslan, the Christ figure, brings proper order, puts the sons of Adam and the daughters of Eve on the proper thrones in Narnia. And this lack of festivity, this lack of jovialness, this lack of happiness and joy. What is the phrase that permeates this book?
Always winter, never Christmas. It's been a long winter.
It is always winter, never Christmas. And who, by the way, is a great depiction of being jovial, other than St. Nicholas. He has rosy cheeks, he has his ho-ho-ho, his laugh, his big belly, his joy that he brings as he brings gifts. And so, at the end of the book, we have the children also hunting the white stag as old are kings and queens of Narnia, and the merriment that comes with them being on the throne. These are all things that have to do with Jupiter, but they also have to do with the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Let's talk about, I'll just give one more example here, whet your appetite. I'm not going to give them all away, but you might find this interesting as you read the book and as you reread the Chronicles of Narnia. Let's talk about Mercury and the horse and his boy. My favorite of the Chronicles of Narnia books, as it is for many people. But Mercury is really silver water. It's associated with the planet, and it is one of twins, messages, and words. These are all things that have to do with Mercury. In the Iliad, Homer tells the story of two twins, Castor and Pollux. And in The Horse and His Boy, we have Cor or Sashta and Corin, who are twins separated at birth. And Castor breaks horses. In the Homer Iliad, Castor breaks horses and Pollux is a boxer. And Lewis uses both these archetypes in his own story. Shasta is the rider of the horse and Coron is the boxer. And this is important to Mercury because Castor and Pollux were considered part of the constellation that Mercury ruled over in the sky. Speech is also tied to Mercury in that he brings messages, which show up in Sashta being one to deliver messages, and in fact that the horse he rides is capable of speech. And travel goes along with bringing messages, which is why much of the book is about Shasta's journey through the desert and out of the land of the East. So that's Ward's thesis. That's his driving point throughout the whole book. And I think he's spot on. Most of scholarship surrounding Lewis now is adopting this view. Now takes this view. I think he has so much evidence for the view that you would have to have substantial counter evidence to disprove this theory now. As far as readability of the book and its impact, I already spoke a little bit about that. The impact has been pretty big as far as scholarship with Lewis has been concerned. The book itself is 12 chapters, just under 150 pages. It is very readable. I got through it, and not reading voraciously, but I got through it in about 4 to 5 days. So, very readable. I'd give it 5 phonographs. Thank you, Michael Ward, for this book. If you want to, I will link the book down in the description below. I will also link where I first heard about this book, actually, was a lecture by Ryan Reeves in his C.S. Lewis class of Gordon Conwell. I will link his lecture on the book below, as well as 1 or 2 lectures that Michael Ward gives about the book itself, about these ideas in here. If you want to watch those before you go read it, or just watch those instead of reading it, although I would encourage you to read the book. But other than that, I think it's good. I think that's all I got for you. So yeah, get the book, watch the lectures. If you're a Narnia fan, you'll find this fascinating. I found it utterly captivating and thought it was fantastic.